Hello everyone, and welcome to this new edition of Euroquestions, the bi-monthly webinar of the Jacques Delors Institute. Today we have the pleasure to welcome Arantxa González, Dean of the Paris School of International Affairs at Sciences Po and member of the Jacques Delors Institute's Board of Directors. The IMF warned on April 22nd that the global economy could be hit hard as the US sweeping tariff threatened to spread in all-out trade war. The transatlantic trade relation, with a two-way commerce totaling an annual of 1.6 trillion euros, is being shaken. Countries all around the world are rethinking their trade and investment strategy to respond to President Trump's tariff. Since being confirmed in December 2025, von der Leyen's Commission, which handled the trade policy on behalf of the bloc of the 27 member states, has accelerated trade negotiation with partners across the world, including Mercosur and Switzerland, relaunched negotiation with Thailand and the Philippines, and reopened discussion with the United Arab Emirates. So how has the European Union responded to Trump's tariff policy, and what are the measures that have taken to protect their own economy? Is it enough? What about China? And what are the implications for the World Trade Organization? I remind you that you can use the Q&A tool at the bottom of your screen. Arantxa, over to you.
Thank you very much, Laura, and thank you also to those that are participating for this opportunity to discuss something as important as the international trading system, international trade, its present and its future. Let's say that the current situation is the biggest questioning of the international trading system since 1947. When the World Trade Organization was created in 1995, for a while we were living without an organization with rules, but without an organization to administer them. A lot of hope was built into a system that was one of the most advanced in international governance. And since 2008, we have seen a gradual erosion of the system, a failure of the big round of international negotiations, questioning of the dispute settlement, unfair trading practices increasing, use of national security exemptions in a very loose manner. And there was a bit of a build-up of this gradual erosion with the first Trump administration, with many trade restrictive measures being taken. But I guess it's fair to say that right now the situation is slightly different in that it's not a gradual erosion, it's not sand in the machine, but it's a questioning of the international trading system itself. We've seen this with the signature of the Reciprocal Tariffs Act, which in reality questioned the three big fundamental principles of the international trading system. First, the fact that tariffs are negotiated. They are decided by a negotiation between parties through reciprocal concessions. And here we are just moving into the terrain of unilaterally a country unilaterally deciding on tariffs it will apply to its partners. Second is the principle of non-discrimination. You don't treat different partners in different manners. And here again, the Reciprocal Tariff Act, despite the name, is in reality discriminating between trading partners. And number three is special measures for the poorest countries. And here is almost like a special measures for the world's richest country. So it's a questioning of the international trading system itself on a scale that we hadn't seen before. The fact that the moves on the US side were unexpected at this scale, unexpected in that the questioning started there where it was least expected, which was Canada and Mexico. The fact that there was constant shifting in the measures, taking them one day and removing them or modifying them the next day, thus scope of the measures that were announced, and the absence of clarity about the purpose of the measures. One day it was to generate revenue. Another day it was to shift industrial production to the US. The third day it was about extracting concessions on the monetary front from trading partners. This has led to a severe impact of this announcement on stock markets, and more importantly, on bond markets. And this turbulence can be attributed to two factors. First, that the goals are not clear. Markets don't understand what the goals are and what the possible benefits could be. And the second is that markets understand very well what the costs can be. And the costs on the scale of the announcements on the Reciprocal Tariff Act were very heavy costs. So this led to turbulence in markets that led to an adjustment on the US administration side with the announcement to pause tariffs and start the process of negotiation of 90 days. It has also led to targeted exclusions, exceptions to the measures announced, exclusions for products that are essentially imported from one country, China, to the US market for electronics, exceptions for vehicles components, exceptions on steel, and a discussion on the US domestic market about support to affected domestic parties as a result of these measures. So it has led to chaos internationally and also a gradual withdrawing of these measures together with support for domestic operators. So let's say that seen from where we all see it, it looks as if globalization has defeated the US administration, that globalized bond markets that are highly globalized and with the US, which is a highly indebted country and dependent on these bond markets, has defeated the purpose of the US administration. But this does not mean that the damage doesn't continue. There continues to be damage, first because 90 days of uncertainty is too long a period. Number two, because it's unclear where these negotiations will land. Are these negotiations about tariffs, and will these newly negotiated tariffs be applied erga omnes or only to the US? Is the negotiations about purchasing more from the US and on certain specific sectors like energy, like defense material, and so on, or in agriculture? Is it about extracting from other partners a commitment not to trade with other parties, in particular China? Is not clear. And when something is not clear in international markets, it has a cost. There is also a big chilling effect on investors, also on investors in the US market because of the policy uncertainty. And a final point on the damage that can continue to occur, in particular on the infrastructure that powers international trade, which is shipping, with measures on shipping that are extremely harsh, whose impact would be very hard, where for the moment it would be very difficult to find an alternative in the short term. So it would all be about absorbing costs. And with these costs for now, as things stand, being perceived by markets as being too high. So the war may have a victor in the form of globalization, but the damage certainly continues. What's the impact on the multilateral trading system? In my view, it can be summed up in what the 87% of world import markets meaning everybody but the US. It will depend on what this 87% will do. It's very clear that the US, which represents 13% of world imports, has its own plans for the multilateral trading system, but it's less clear what are the plans of the 87% remaining, and much will depend on what they do. They could do three things. First, they could agree that the rules of international trade are important but need to be flexibilized. In any event, the world where we are moving trade-wise would seem to indicate that we will have higher tariffs for longer, that we will see more state interventions in the economy, that we will probably see more extensive use than in the past of the national security exemption. So members could agree to have a little bit less predictability, a little bit more protection, but to do this within a framework of rules that would limit the situation we are in now, which is a movement from rules-based to power-based. So the first option would be, yes, to agree that there is a certain degree of power-based in international trade that is higher than in the past, but that rules still have a place, multilateral rules still have an important place. The second option would be some form of World Trade Organization minus, some form of an organization where members agree to move in variable geometry, even moving forward without the US, or maybe without others if there are others that are not willing to move forward, but continue to ensure that among themselves, the essence of the multilateral trading system continues. The third option would be, obviously, to agree to disagree in the World Trade Organization, to wait for a better moment, but to try and keep the spirits and the rules, and maybe incubate future rules for the trading system outside the WTO, waiting for a better moment to bring them back into a global space. This is a little bit what I see that could be the purpose of a EU CPTPP alliance that seems to be floated. So in a nutshell, there are options. The options will depend on what the 87% would do, how the 13% that the US represents wants to move forward, obviously. I think they should all agree on one measure today, which is to not make matters worse, not make it worse between themselves. If the 87% decide to not pursue unilateral trade policies among themselves, it would be an important contribution to not making matters worse. And finally, they could do the most vulnerable, the poorest, the weakest countries also a favor by excluding them from the measures they will take, they have taken. Exclude them in that it would be important not to aggravate the situation of the most vulnerable economies around the world. So with this, Lara, I thought we could put all these elements on the table, and very much looking forward to the conversation now.
Thank you very much, Arantxa. So we received a few questions, but maybe a first one from me. Do you think that the EU current trade policy are enough to protect its economy interest in the long term, or will it need a drastic measure to be required?
No, the EU has options. And essentially, the EU has three options. And from this point of view, perhaps the EU is in a better position than other economies around the world, which is why the European Union has also a particular responsibility in this moment. The three options that the EU has in its hands is first to tap more into the single market. and build a continuum between the conversation it's been having to deepen the European Union single market with the current geopolitical disruption. There is a great report that the chief economist of BNP has produced, where it demonstrates how 1% loss in export markets to the US can be compensated with a 0.12% of deepening of the European market. So the first is to deepen, to build trade resilience by deepening the market that is purely in European hands, where the EU does not need others to agree, but it's in the 27 member states' hands. Second is obviously to engage in opening up other opportunities with countries around the world. And it's therefore no surprise that the EU is very active in the international negotiating landscape. Negotiations concluded with Mercosur, with Switzerland, with Mexico, ongoing with India, with Thailand, with the Philippines, starting with the United Arab Emirates, and signals being sent of an alliance with the countries of the CPTPP. So there again, the EU has an active trade policy that it can deploy now to open up new opportunities. The third option in the EU's hands is obviously to make better use of the trade agreements that the EU has negotiated. The EU has negotiated over 76 trade agreements with countries around the world, compared to around 20% in the case of the US, which means that there is a space and a scope to use those agreements better, and therefore to either helping economic operators in Europe, especially small and medium enterprises, benefit from accessing those markets, and through that, build resilience for the difficulties, inevitable difficulties that we are seeing on the transatlantic side.
Thank you, Arantxa. Maybe another question regarding the WTO responding to the current trade dispute, and what role could it play in resolving the crisis or not?
Well, I think first, the WTO can help a lot in putting a spotlight, bringing transparency, running the numbers, running the simulations, helping countries understand where the vulnerabilities are. Let me give you an example. We talk a lot about the possibilities of trade diversion, that the trade that cannot go to the US would be going to other jurisdictions in the world. And, it would be very, very helpful, in my view, if the World Trade Organization, if the Secretariat of the WTO could run numbers that would help members in understand what's the real size of the problem, because maybe the problem is smaller than countries think it is. Let's bear in mind also that some countries have limited capacity to run those numbers. So there is a lot that can be done in monitoring, in transparency, in giving more transparency over what's happening. This is a bit what the World Trade Organization did during the 2008 financial crisis. And it was a very helpful tool to help members, adopt policies that in the end would be helpful to themselves. I also think that the WTO can provide a neutral ground where countries can sit and discuss their difficulties, the differences they have over international trade. Not only that there is a dispute settlement, of course, but it's a neutral ground where countries can come, sit in a without prejudice manner to have useful conversations today to basically lower the temperature. So these two are very low-hanging fruits in a way that the system, the multilateral trading system, can help members of the international trading community with today.
Thank you. We received another question regarding the impact on the greening. Could you please also set out what this movement in trade policy means for the EU decarbonization agenda and internationally, making clean products take a larger share of the market globally in trade?
So I think there is I mean, if the question, because I'm not sure that the question is clear, but if the question is how can we advance more sustainable trade and more sustainable trading practices, it's clear that there are different views within the membership in the World Trade Organization about this. And there are differences both in terms of objectives. There are countries that question the necessity to have as an objective sustainability. And that's, let's say, a bigger issue than those that adhere to the objective of more sustainable trade, but would like the measures that are taken to ensure more sustainability to be negotiated, to be discussed and debated internationally, and not simply be the product of unilateral decisions. So I think we have the World Trade Organization and more broadly countries can have avenues, need to have avenues to treat these two issues. To the first question is more difficult because obviously it means that there are countries that will not want to work on an agenda that would be about trade and sustainability. So it looks as if this would be more of a variable geometry. But for those that are interested in the agenda, and in particular those that care about that, in my view, there should be a premium for discussing and debating measures, whether it is to contribute to emission reduction, whether it is to promote trading green products or green services, whether it is to green value chains or to fight against plastic pollution, all of which are, or to ensure the traceability of value chains. All of this, the preferred avenue seems to be for those who care is to find the spaces to do this in a cooperative manner, with unilateralism being probably the last resort after all others have been exploited.
Thank you. Maybe another question. We received a few regarding China. Do you think that the EU should engage with China?
Well, I think the answer to this question from where I sit is an obvious yes. The EU should engage with China. Understanding that engaging is the bare minimum when you represent 15% of international trade and China represents basically the same amount. When you are systemic to the system, you have to engage with those that are systemic to the system. So engagement, absolutely yes. Does engagement mean that you've got to agree on anything and everything? Answer, no. I think it's pretty clear that the EU and China have their disagreements. They have their disagreements on economic matters, on trade matters, whether it is on trade imbalances, on unfair trading practices. They have their disagreement over political and security matters, whether it's over Ukraine or whether it's over human rights. But they also share common interest, and they also have common areas of engagement. Both care about reducing emissions. Both care about the Paris Climate Change Agreement. Both care about having a functional rules-based international trading system. Both care about regulating artificial intelligence, just to put a few on the table. So, I mean, I think the engagement between the two should start with acknowledging the areas where there is disagreement, but also working in the areas where there is a possibility to collaborate. And again, it does not mean that you've got to accept It does not mean that you've got to surrender your interest. You've got to defend your interest. But defending European interest, in my view today, means having a functional relation with all countries that are systemic in international affairs, and in particular in international trade and economics.
Thank you. Maybe another question, refocusing on Europe. What will a reintroduction of trade tariff mean for Europe's competitiveness?
So the answer is it depends. It depends on the level of the tariffs. It depends on the products that are covered. And it depends on what happens with others. And I'm saying this because the three are different angles of the same problem. The competitiveness of Europe will be impacted if competitors of Europe get better deals on the US market for products where the EU is in sharp competition with other third countries that get, quote unquote, a better deal. So it will depend on how different conditions of access to the US market are for products that are important to Europe and where there are competitors that get better deals. It will depend also on the final level of the tariffs that the US will keep to access its own market. And it will depend on the scope of the products where these tariffs will be applied. But let's say that it will also depend, by the way, on the response that the European Union takes at the end of a negotiation with the US, depending on where these negotiations land, is how does the EU respond if it feels that there is no space for negotiation or the negotiation is imbalanced. But let's say that it's an important trading relation for the European Union. It's the most intense trade relationship in the world. It's equally one of the most important trade relations for the US. So as we discuss how it affects the competitiveness of Europe, I like to introduce how this affects the competitiveness of the US also. And let me end by saying that up until now, we've been discussing a lot about trade in goods. But there is also the dimension of trade in services. So where the US is extremely competitive on the European market. So answer to this question is, for now, it depends. And I hope that in the future, the answer to this question is that we have not put sand or even gravel in the transatlantic trade that will make us both poorer in the process.
Thank you. Maybe a final question for you. Do you think that the EU should adopt a harder position vis-à-vis of the United States so the EU can assert itself as a global power? Would it be an efficient strategy?
To me, the efficient strategy from the EU is the one that gets the EU to its objective. And what's its objective? Is to remove as much as possible obstacles to trade with the US, and by the way, with other countries too, which is why the EU has been, in my view, smart in proposing the 0 for 0, because at the end of the day, we all know that tariffs are taxes that someone ends paying, generally your domestic consumers or your domestic companies. So I think for me, a smart strategy is the one that gets the EU to where it wants to be, which is less tariff, less unilateral protectionism, and more open and regulated markets. Now, for that, the EU would probably have to use sticks and carrots, would have to be firm in its objectives, would have to be ready to negotiate, but also very clear about where the EU will not negotiate. And in my view, the EU should not negotiate its capacity to regulate. This is its sovereign choice, just like it is the sovereign choice of the US to regulate for its own market. So jury's out, but I have no doubt that the EU, being who it is, it will be tough in defending its interests.
Thank you very much, Arantxa, for your analysis, and thank you to everyone for following today's Euroquestion. We will send the replay over to you later today. The next session will be held on Wednesday, 14th of May, and we will have the pleasure to welcome Sébastien Maillard, Special Advisor to the Jacques Delors Institute, to discuss the upcoming UK and EU summit and the potential reset of their relationship. Thank you again, gracias Arantxa, and have a nice day, everyone.
Un placer, goodbye.